We'll be investigating a missing submarine, zombie worms, and some strange cubes. Let's go! Antarctica versus the Sahara. Wait a second. Antarctica is the biggest desert in the world? But it's covered in ice and snow, so what about the Sahara? It might seem weird, but it's true. Antarctica is officially the biggest desert on the planet. It covers an incredible area of 5.5 million square miles. It isn't just a bit bigger than the Sahara, it's twice as big. Another fact that will blow your socks off is that Antarctica is drier than the Sahara. The place that's covered in ice and snow is considered drier than Egypt's Great Sand Sea, which is part of the Sahara. Antarctica is drier than the place where you can't open your mouth without getting sand in it. How is it possible? Because of the extremely cold air. Chalk it up to science. Just because it's snowy doesn't mean it's humid. The incredibly cold air in Antarctica contains zilch in the way of water. The weather is harsh and it is frigid, but that cold works to obliterate moisture from the air. You get more moisture lying on a sand dune in Africa at sunrise with your tongue sticking out. I don't want to put the Sahara to shame though. It's still a brutal and inhospitable place. Over 3.6 million square miles of scorched terrain. It gets an average of between 4 and 10 inches of rain and has swallowed countless civilizations. The Sahara covers more countries than the Amazon jungle, with Saharan sand blowing over Algeria, Egypt, Mali, Tunisia, and many more. Here's a fun fact for you. 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was practically a jungle. Its sandy dunes were covered in green grass, towering trees, and prehistoric beasts. There were whole civilizations who lived in the tropical landscape. The Sahara had rivers, waterfalls, and plenty of fresh food. You could hardly tell the difference between the Sahara and the Amazon up until about 1600 BC. That was when a big change occurred. Humans may be responsible for climate change, but nothing changes the climate more than the Earth itself. There was a shift in the planet's axis that caused the Sahara to suddenly turn into a blistering wasteland. Scientists think that in 15,000 years, the axis could shift and the Sahara could be green again. On the other hand, Antarctica has been a frozen desert pretty much forever. The continent started to be covered in ice about 23 million years ago. There may have been some periodic melting, but it hasn't been free of ice for at least 15 million years. The missing submarine. Another year, another missing submarine, only this one isn't filled with people. In Antarctica, the submersible vessel vanished after diving underneath the icy water. The sub was one of only 3 highly advanced submersibles of its kind. Unlike the Titan, whose horrific drama we all watched unfold last year, the RAN is unlikely to ever be found. It cost $3.6 million, with its loss being a major blow for climate scientists. But just what in the world was it doing all by itself in Antarctica? It was sent by scientists at the University of Gothenburg to study the Thwaites Glacier, also called the Doomsday Glacier. Project leader Anna Wallen said it was the second time the team took RAN to investigate the area underneath the glacier's ice. The first time, things went over fine. This time, the submarine never came up. As you can likely gather from the huge price tag, RAN was a major piece of technology. It could reach depths of the Antarctic that were previously unreachable. It could go hundreds of feet beneath the surface to scan the underbelly of the glacier. Its loss is a total bummer. Scientists are desperate to know more about how the Thwaites Glacier is melting and when exactly that doomsday is due. The reason people call it the Doomsday Glacier is because of its massive size, and the fact that if it melts, we could all be doomed. If you think Noah had it bad, just wait until the next flood. This glacier is the biggest on the planet, over 80 miles across. It's melting as we speak, or as I speak and you listen. Its melting contributes to 4% of the total global sea level rise. If the glacier were to melt entirely, the sea level would rise by 25 inches. That is a humongous rise. 2 feet of extra water would seep into the oceans of the world. Many places would end up submerged. Potential cities that could be totally obliterated include New York, Bangkok, Vancouver, Venice, and dozens of others. This submarine was trying to determine when the destruction could happen, but after it went down into the dark, the scientists lost contact. It's still missing and presumed terminated. The cube. If you've seen the photograph of a large cube in the middle of Antarctica radiating a sort of heavenly light, you might be wondering what the deal is. I'm here to set the record straight. Reports have been coming in of a cube almost 2 miles long discovered in Antarctica. The reports aren't from what you'd call reliable sources. They've mostly been posted on social media. Some are claiming the giant cube is where a supreme intelligence is controlling the Matrix-style simulation of our world. The alleged discovery of the cube stirred up so much controversy that scientists came forward to denounce it as false. Senior researcher Walt Meyer from the National Snow and Ice Data Center said the glowing cube is nothing but a made-up conspiracy. A conspiracy that was likely inspired by a real thing that's almost as interesting as a huge glowing cube. Walt thinks the conspiracy theory comes from the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory. This is a real place in Antarctica, located at the South Pole and buried 1.6 miles deep beneath Antarctic ice. The laboratory is like a villain's secret lair, embedded deep in the ice where nobody can find it. The simple fact Ice Cube exists proves that the government could be doing all kinds of crazy things under the ice. If a bunch of scientists could build an observatory to search for subatomic particles, imagine what the military could build. There doesn't appear to be much proof that the giant cube exists. I would like to mention, though, in most cases when a conspiracy theory goes viral, scientists don't jump out of their seats to refute it. But in this case, a lot of scientists came forward very quickly. Glacial geologist Bethan Davies said the cube would obviously show up on satellites, so it couldn't possibly be real. Harvard professor Carlos Argüelles Delgado also refuted the claim. For some people, it was very suspicious. Because so few people have been to Antarctica, it's fun to speculate about mysterious things that could be happening there. But for scientists that have actually been in person and have dedicated their life to research there, they aren't too happy about all of these crazy ideas. Bird flu disaster. A deadly sickness has made it to Antarctica, threatening an extinction event of tragic proportions. Just this year, 2024, a deadly strain of bird flu was found on the Antarctic mainland for the first time in history. It's not a human extinction we're worried about. Scientists have raised concern over a potential mass casualty event in penguin colonies. Penguins are birds, after all. They are especially susceptible to bird flu. Scientists confirmed the presence of H5 avian influenza in 2 dead squaw seabirds near an Argentinian base. I know nobody wants to hear about pathogenic viruses sweeping the globe. We've all had enough of that. But you might still like to be informed that over the past few years, bird flu has been spreading across the globe on migratory bird routes. The new arrival of avian influenza in the most remote part of the world is scary stuff. Ron Fauchier from the Erasmus University Medical Center said never before has such a massive spread of a virus been seen in wild birds. It's not something you hear about a lot in the news, but birds are dying in the millions. Why do you think chicken has gotten so expensive? And don't even get me started on cartons of eggs. Antarctic penguins are safe for now, and hopefully forever and ever. The one thing scientists are extra afraid of is that penguins don't have any kind of immunity to the bird flu. Other birds have had to deal with it before, so they are at least prepared. But penguins are extremely susceptible to an outbreak that could wipe them all out. The $50 billion plan. The whole bird flu thing is seriously depressing, so let's try to do something a bit more on the positive side. Scientists recently proposed a $50 billion plan to stop the Doomsday Glacier from melting and destroying the world. Okay, this topic might still be a little depressing, but at least there's a silver lining and a possibility of hope. Do you remember the Thwaites Glacier I told you about? 74,000 square miles and losing billions of tons of ice? It might not be too late to stop the glacier from raising sea levels around the world by up to 10 feet. Professor John Moore is on a mission to slow the melting and protect civilization. His plan involves placing a curtain in front of the glacier. This guy wants to put a 62-mile-long pair of drapes in front of the block of ice to stop it from melting. In your opinion, does this seem ridiculous or like a perfectly reasonable solution? It's not a bad idea, but the price tag is staggering. The curtain is also a little different than you might be imagining. It's a huge piece of material that gets anchored to the seafloor, blocking warm water from further melting the glacier. Most of the glacier's ice loss is the result of melting from the bottom. Warm water gets pushed underneath the glacier from the current, warming the ice. You can think of it like underfloor heating, keeping your toes nice and toasty from below. Blocking the incoming warm water would theoretically slow down the melting, but for how long? And is it worth $50 billion? Who's even going to pay for it? What is this ice ship? I want to know what is going on with this ice ship discovered in Antarctica, and I want to know now. Ever since satellite images appeared of the giant ship in 2020, nobody has been able to figure out what the thing is in the pictures. Is it a lost cruise ship that's being scrubbed from the records? Somebody had better come clean soon. Here's what I can tell you about the ice ship based on all the data available. It's real, discovered on Google Earth. It looks exactly like a boat. You can see what appear to be smokestacks at the top. And there's even a row of portholes along the midsection where you would expect cabin windows to be. The ship was discovered 100 miles from the edge of Antarctica, lying sideways in the ice. It's just underneath New Zealand. The mysterious vessel is also approximately 428 feet long. Maybe it's a yacht, maybe it's a lost vessel, or maybe it's a coincidence. I'm not sure if this is a real boat or a chunk of boat-shaped ice. If you have any insight into this mystery, let me know. Antarctic mummies and zombie worms. Antarctica is covered in mummies. You can't walk along a shoreline without coming across at least one ghoulish skeleton or a creepy mummy. Not human mummies, usually seal mummies petrified in the ice and snow. Underneath a thin layer of snow are hundreds upon hundreds of years of preserved animal remains. Antarctica is one giant graveyard. Most of the bones belong to whales, swept ashore or deposited by glacial changes. You can find gentoo penguins sitting amidst the bones of great leviathans. Antarctic fur seals lounge on rocky shores covered in so many bones, it's like Scar's lair in The Lion King. There are creepy bones under the water too. In 2013, scientists discovered a whale skeleton resting on the bottom of the sea floor in Antarctica for the first time. It's known as a whale fall, something really rare to come across. A whale fall is a whale that died, floated slowly to the bottom of the ocean, and is in the process of decomposition. The reason finding a whale fall is so rare is that they aren't around for long. The instant a whale's corpse hits the seafloor, creatures began devouring it. When scientists used a remote underwater vehicle equipped with high-def cameras to examine the whale, they found it was home to 9 different species. Only the skeleton remained, and already it was hosting a smorgasbord of weird animals, including the hyper-creepy zombie worm. The bones belong to an Antarctic minke whale, which was confirmed through DNA tests. Scientists think it was anywhere from 4 to 64 years old when it died. The whale was also in the final phase of its decomposition. There are 4 stages to a whale decomposing at the bottom of the sea, and without getting too gross, I'll tell you that each stage of decomposition involves the whale carcass being eaten by a different group of creatures. When it first hits the ground, sharks and crustaceans are the ones who feed on it. By the end, animals have moved into the whale's exposed bones like ivory apartments. One of the weirder species found living in this particular whale's bones was the Osedax, also called the bone-eating zombie worm. This thing has existed since the Cretaceous, feasting on whale bones since the days of the dinosaurs. There are over 30 known species of zombie worm, each one more disgusting than the last. Scientists only identified them in 2002. And since then, they've been found at nearly every whale fall. Wherever a bone is decomposing, zombie worms are nearby. Osedax fenrisi was named in 2020 after Loki's son, Fenris the wolf from Norse mythology. Some of these creepy worms are only the length of your little finger. Some are smaller than an eyelash. They always seem to come out of nowhere each time a whale dies to eat its bones in a seriously disturbing way. The worms punch holes in the bones by spitting out acid, then wriggle inside and make themselves comfortable. And now for a quick break because it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Matt Garrett and Beto Garcia, who's a new subscriber. Welcome, guys! Thanks so much for watching and spending time with us. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. The Sick Passenger and the Penguins. An unexpected change of itinerary during an Antarctic cruise led to the discovery of an entirely new penguin colony. The story surrounding these adorable flightless birds and their secret sanctuary is as bizarre as it is incredible. The Viking Octantis cruise ship was supposed to take its passengers to Des Moines Point, which is an old transfer station used by the British Antarctic Survey. They were also supposed to visit Mikkelsen Harbor, which was once a refuge for whalers. But the passengers didn't make it to their destination because somebody had to go and get desperately ill. It only takes one to ruin everybody's trip. Though of course, it wasn't the passengers' fault they got sick. Actually, they were so violently ill that Captain Jorgen Kardestig had to make a sudden turn towards the nearest airport. That would be on King George Island in the South Shetlands. It wasn't exactly on the other side of town. It was more of a rescue mission at this point. If you've ever been in dire need of medical attention while on a holiday, far from civilization and far from doctors, surely you can sympathize. It's an awful experience. The captain pushed full steam ahead to the nearest airport. The sick passenger was taken by air to the hospital where they received treatment. With the passengers safe, the captain resumed the cruise. The little change of plan resulted in a reroute. The ship sailed into waters that the captain and crew were not used to sailing through. By a stroke of good fortune, they happened to pass by Diaz Rock. Diaz Rock is an extremely remote island in Antarctica that nobody has ever paid much attention to. Not until the Viking cruise ship sailed by it and those on board turned their binoculars on the random rocky outcrop. They were shocked to see tiny eyes looking back at them. Chin-strap penguins, the most ridiculously adorable tuxedoed birds you will ever lay eyes on. They heard the boat, emerged from their stone nests, and gaped incredulously at the ship passengers. This rocky refuge turned out to be home to an entirely unknown colony of penguins. Now, if you are finished admiring how adorable they are, I think I'd like to tell you something a little gross. Did you know that penguins are usually smelled before they're seen? Penguin colonies are surprisingly smelly. They leave bright pink guano all over the rocks. You can typically smell the putrid stench of a penguin colony long before you see them. What do you think? Still cute? The ice wall. What if everything you knew about Antarctica was a lie? What if I were to tell you the truth of Antarctica is hidden behind a great big wall, and the secret is maintained by a shadow organization? Would you believe me or call me crazy? I'm not here to tell you anything that I can't prove, but I can give you some insight into a bizarre theory that has been around for centuries. The theory states that somewhere in Antarctica is a huge wall of ice. It's even bigger than the ice wall in Game of Thrones. A solid wall of pure ice separating the known world from something incredible. Incredible like what? Try the vastness of space. This theory is a flat Earth one, rooted nowhere in reality. If you were to pass the ice wall, you'd simply fall off the planet and drift forever into oblivion. People have told stories about an ice wall that surrounds the border of the Earth since the Middle Ages. Beyond the wall of ice is either space, a vast realm of stardust and wormholes, or a new realm full of monsters. As far as scientists are concerned, there is no wall of ice. Antarctica is a continent, no different from North America or South America. It's just a big piece of land that happens to be at the bottom of the world where it's cold. That's not to say the government isn't up to something, performing secret experiments or doing something weird in Antarctica. But if that's true, they are doing it underground, and not on the other side of a wall that could theoretically be flown over by an airplane. Iceberg A23A. 40 years ago, the biggest iceberg in the world broke off Antarctica. It just split, going out into the world on its own. It didn't even leave behind a goodbye note. Before it could get very far, it got stuck on the ocean floor. Now, 4 decades later, it's moving again. Not just moving, this thing is running. The iceberg is bigger than I can possibly describe with words. Wait, no it's not. The iceberg weighs 1,000 tons and is 4 times bigger than New York City. There, that's a perfect description. Scientists call it A23A, but I think a better name is the big one. If you have an even better name for the largest iceberg on the planet, be sure to tell me in the comments. The Great Iceberg started its journey into warmer waters about a year ago. Recently, it was caught spinning as it drifted farther away from Antarctica. Spinning is something very typical for icebergs. They start to rotate as they reach warmer waters and slowly melt. The iceberg was last spotted moving through a stretch of water between Elephant Island and the South Orkney Islands near the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. It's moving northeast at a rate of roughly 30 miles an hour. That's pretty good for a gigantic iceberg. It's highly unlikely that iceberg A23A is going to cause catastrophic damage. Although it is twice the size of Greater London, around 1,500 square miles, most of it is underwater. The part that's above water is very close to crumbling completely. Scientists have been watching it through satellite images, seeing in real time as the iceberg is pitted and pocked from waves crashing against it. It's only a matter of time before it melts entirely. Running on ice. Let me introduce you to the woman who recorded the longest run ever in Antarctica. This is the woman who puts us all to shame by running an ultra-marathon across the most savage desert in the world. Donna Urquhart told CNN Sport it felt like running in a cloud. Sometimes it was snowing, sometimes she was disoriented. Often she stumbled just trying to put one foot in front of the other. At one point, the violent winds and bitter cold pushed Donna away from the flags marking her route. She just about ran herself lost in the one place you do not want to get lost. How far could you run in Antarctica? I know a lot of us can't even run to the mailbox, so it might be a moot question. But even for the best runners, Antarctica provides a brutal challenge. Donna, at 49 years old, managed to run an astonishing 871 miles over 28 days on the continent. That's 1,402 kilometers, setting the record for the longest polar run in history. That's not a bad run in the coldest, windiest, and driest place on the planet. Would you ever try it? Underwater volcanoes. New maps have been created of the seafloor between Tasmania and Antarctica. The maps, produced in high resolution, reveal a sunken chain of volcanoes whose towering peaks could be stopping Antarctica from flooding the world. The submarine volcanoes are 13,000 feet underneath the surface of the ocean. Scientists who mapped the area were interested to see that the volcanoes are directly in the path of the strongest ocean current on the planet. It's called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, flowing clockwise around Antarctica. This incredible current, raging like whitewater rapids underneath the surface, acts as a barrier. Picture Antarctica as being in the middle of a hurricane, with the hurricane winds being the circumpolar current. The current keeps the continent frozen, and without it, all of Antarctica could melt, and quickly. The research was done on board the Australian vessel Investigator, with scientists using data from NASA and the French National Centre for Space Studies. The newly discovered volcanoes stretch across the ocean floor for 7,700 miles. 8 of the volcanoes are dormant, with their peaks 4,900 feet above the floor. It's not even the volcanoes that are the most exciting part of this discovery. The exciting part is how the volcanoes play a role in shaping ocean currents that swirl around Antarctica. Researchers think the volcanoes formed about 20 million years ago during epic eruptions. Now they act like barriers that shape the circular currents, helping to control the very weather systems of the ocean. It goes to show how chaotic the whole world is. Antarctica's currents, which prevent global warming from catastrophically destroying humanity, work all because of some random volcanoes at the bottom of the ocean. But not for long. Heat is leaking toward Antarctica, threatening a total collapse of these intricate systems. The creepy spider. The last creature you would ever expect to be pulled from Antarctica's sea floor has just been pulled from Antarctica's sea floor. A ferocious, spider-like cretin with claws and a bizarre feeding rod was found lurking in the icy ocean. Scientists say it's a yellow sea spider. 1,900 feet deep is where this thing calls home. Way down at the bottom of the Ross Sea in cold, sunless dark. Nobody had ever seen such a sea spider before until it was pulled up from its domain with a net. Scientists have now determined it to be an entirely new species. It's a new species, but still a sea spider, making it an aquatic freak. Unless you think spiders are cute, in which case the spider is adorable. The single specimen, the only one currently known, was collected by the ice-breaking vessel RVIB Nathaniel B. Palmer. It's preserved inside a jar of 95% ethanol. The creepy-crawly marine bug is bigger than most sea spiders, with its legs about 1.2 inches long. While bigger than most, it's still far from being the largest. There are sea spiders that have leg spans of over 2 feet long. There are a lot of weird details about this creature. It doesn't feed using a mouth, but rather a tubular proboscis. It has an organic straw in place of a mouth that it uses to slurp up its victims. It also has humongous claws. They aren't big enough to hurt you, but still big enough to carve up dinner in Antarctica. The sea spider breathes from its legs. It's closely related to crabs, and it lives a mere 200 miles from the South Pole. And you thought moving to Antarctica would save you from your spider phobia. The Future Oasis. Antarctica is changing. Not just the systems underneath the water like I told you about, but also on the surface. New research has shown that there are growing areas of open water in Antarctica that could lead to the establishment of new ecosystems. The research was done by scientists at the University of Otago. They discovered that newly expanding open waters within the sea ice could enable the growth of new coastal plants and the arrival of new animals. It isn't happening now, but it's definitely possible in the future. The growing areas of open water are almost like oases that you find in the Sahara. Picture an oasis, a pool of warm water surrounded by sand and palm trees. Now replace the sand with ice and the palm trees with penguins. That's what's happening in Antarctica. These cold version oases are known as polynyas. Scientists like Professor Fraser say that right now it's difficult for non-native plants and animals to establish themselves in Antarctica. But as more of these cold oases appear, it will get easier. New animals could arrive, slowly but surely changing the ecosystem. As the water warms and more holes in the ice appear, Antarctica has a better chance of attracting new creatures to its borders. That could be exciting. The Antarctic Accent. What happens when you take people from all over the world and isolate them in a bleak landscape of darkness and ice? Apparently, they develop their own accent. After being isolated in Antarctica for 6 months, scientists were shocked to find themselves speaking in an entirely new dialect. The RSS Ernest Shackleton sailed away from the wharf and into the Southern Ocean, leaving 26 scientists on a snowy island at the very edge of the Antarctic Peninsula. They waved goodbye, knowing they had 6 long months of winter ahead of them. They were marooned, they were cold, and anything could be about to happen. I'm picturing some cabin fever in the style of The Shining. Nobody was attacked with an axe, but the 26 weeks together in perpetual darkness did do something interesting. Marlon Clark from the British Antarctic Survey and his colleagues experienced some changes, which they logged as part of an experiment. That probably would have been a great reality show. The experiment was simple. Every few weeks, each member of the research team made a recording. They sat in front of a microphone and repeated the same 29 words that appeared on the computer screen before them. The words were specially chosen to contain vowel sounds that sound different when spoken by people with different English accents. In plain terms, words that sound different whether you're Canadian, American, Australian, English, etc. These recordings were sent back to scientists in Germany for analysis. Sure enough, the pronunciation of certain words had changed very slightly. Not enough time had passed to create an entirely new accent, but it was on its way to being developed. The experiment wasn't too surprising. Accents do change when people are isolated or exposed to a new way of speaking. When the Mayflower traveled to North America, isolating those on board for a long time, they started speaking differently. In the future, if people ever colonize Antarctica, they will probably come up with their very own Antarctic accent. Living in Antarctica. Antarctica is the only continent in the world with no permanent settlement. At any given time, there are thousands of scientists working in labs and at research stations. But there aren't any cities or villages where people live throughout the year. What if all that could change? What if you could start fresh in Antarctica? There have been some wild estimates about the future colonization of Antarctica. Some think that by the year 2100, climate change could warm Antarctica so much that it becomes habitable for humans. Pack your bags and bring your heaviest jacket. The average winter temperature right now is minus 56 degrees Fahrenheit, with freezing winds of around 200 miles per hour. But things can change. Antarctic oases are drawing new forms of marine life into Antarctic waters already. Scientists have even found invasive plant and animal species drifting closer to Antarctica as it gets gradually warmer. Still, there are a lot of issues. Professor of Biological Sciences Stephen Chown said the problem isn't just brutal weather. Antarctica is isolated, meaning a population can only be sustained by importing food and goods. There aren't exactly heaps of trees to make houses. Then there's the issue of the ice sheet that covers the continent. Nobody wants to build a power grid on an ice sheet that's constantly melting. No, right now there is little hope that humans will be migrating to Antarctica, but the dream isn't over for the next generation. By 2100, while the rest of the world is boiling, refugees might flock to Antarctica. It could become the only hospitable place in the world. What do you see in Antarctica's future? Will the ice melt and reveal remnants of an alien civilization? Do you think we'll ever live there? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching! Be sure to hit that subscribe button and stick around for an older video that you might have missed.
The hidden ecosystem. More than 1,600 feet beneath the Antarctic ice, scientists have just discovered a hidden world. An ecosystem never before seen by human eyes was found in an underground river, an unreachable world filled with creatures living in dark and jagged caverns. This subterranean habitat was found underneath the Larsen Ice Shelf, which is a huge floating chunk of ice attached to the eastern part of the Antarctic Peninsula. In 2021, a piece of this ice broke off and formed the biggest iceberg in the world. The discovery was made after researchers looked at satellite photos and saw an unusual groove close to where the ice meets the continent of Antarctica. Researchers identified it as a subsurface river, and then they drilled a hole approximately 1,640 feet deep to see what was inside of it. They were shocked when they came out on the other end inside of an underground chamber. They lowered their camera down there, and the video footage they recorded showed hundreds upon hundreds of shrimp-like creatures swimming around. Their lens was swarmed by little crustaceans called amphipods. It was a major shock because nobody had anticipated so much life so deep beneath the ice. According to Craig Stevens, a researcher with the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research in New Zealand, there is clearly an important ecosystem underneath Antarctica. He said the discovery had the scientists jumping up and down for joy. Although, because they only drilled a single hole into the cavern, we still don't know just how extensive the subterranean world really is. There could be even more creatures down there. Perhaps even creatures scientists have never seen before. The return of the fin whales. For the first time in almost 50 years, scientists have witnessed with their own eyes multiple large pods of fin whales feeding in Antarctica. According to the Alfred Wegener Institute for Polar and Marine Research, this is a huge deal. After the blue whale, the fin whale is the biggest in the world, and ever since humans got on boats, they've been busy hunting them to extinction. By 1976, the fin whale had disappeared almost entirely from Antarctica, which was the year that commercial whaling was banned. But scientists and activists were still worried that the whales had been hunted beyond the brink of recovery. Now it looks like things are rebounding for these amazing animals. Even though they are some of the biggest creatures on the planet, they grow very slowly. It took nearly 50 years for the baby whales to grow to the size of behemoths and make babies of their own. Just recently, scientists and filmmakers documented groups of up to 150 fin whales back in their historic feeding areas. That's more fin whales than ever before. What this means in the grander scope of things has yet to be seen. Things are changing, but this could be the start of a whole new world in Antarctica. one rich with sea life. Frozen Belgian ship. The RV Belgica was the very first ship to be used on a Belgian Antarctic expedition between 1897 and 1899. It was also the first ship that wintered in the Antarctic region, at a time when exploring Antarctica was like exploring an alien planet. It was the first expedition at the beginning of the age of Antarctic exploration, and its mission didn't go quite as well as the men on board had hoped. On their way to Antarctica in January 1898, the ship reached Graham Land to its north, and on January 22nd, a man named Karl Vinke was washed overboard and died. But the expedition continued on, and they crossed the Antarctic Circle on February 15th. Days later, on February 28th, the expedition came to a hard standstill because the ship got stuck in the ice. They were trapped. The crew was poorly equipped to deal with winter, and they didn't even have enough clothing to keep themselves warm. There was also a major food shortage, and they were forced to hunt penguins and seals to survive. But what the crew hadn't anticipated was that with winter, the wildlife would flee, and they would be left in a wasteland without food and without aid. On May 17th, the perpetual darkness came. Polar night set in, and the crew didn't see the sun for almost an entire month. The men began to suffer from scurvy, morale dipped dramatically, and men started to go insane. Lieutenant Danko died from a heart condition on June 5th, and it was around that time that a group of men became completely nuts and walked away from the ship, saying they were walking back to Belgium. Almost a full year later, in January 1899, the Belgica was still trapped in ice. Terrified of spending another year trapped, the men used an explosive to blast a channel between the ship and a small patch of open water. After a month of hard work, they finally got away from the ice and sailed home, barely surviving the whole ordeal. Mysterious disk in the ice. A very strange disk has been discovered in Antarctica thanks to Google Earth. A man by the name of Scott Waring, who runs a popular YouTube channel that discusses alien conspiracies, was the one who uncovered the bizarre break in the Antarctic ice and the mysterious disk. In the satellite images, it looks as though the gigantic disc-shaped object had been trapped deep underneath the ice, and now, since some of that ice is broken, it's been revealed for the first time in who knows how many years. Although it's impossible to say what it is just by looking at blurry satellite images, Scott Waring is convinced it's a UFO. According to Scott, the disk is roughly 120 feet across and perfectly circular. It kind of looks like a plate of ice, but Scott says it's definitely a UFO that probably crashed in Antarctica and was frozen thousands, if not millions, of years ago. The gigantic terror birds. A fossil was discovered in Antarctica of one of the most terrifying creatures that ever existed. The fossil is currently the oldest known example of a gigantic bird that lived after the dinosaurs went extinct. It dates back 50 million years and was once part of a living pelagornithid. According to paleontologists, this bird had a wingspan of roughly 18 feet. It was huge. So big, it could have easily preyed on human beings like modern eagles prey on bunny rabbits. This bird lived in Antarctica when the continent was a whole different world. 50 million years ago, Antarctica was covered in trees. It was as warm as the Caribbean, and it was covered in prehistoric beasts. In order for such a large bird to exist here, it must have had ample food. Taking that into consideration, there would have likely been a complex ecosystem of thousands of different animal species. This world of giant birds and whatever other kinds of monsters lived in Antarctica lasted a very long time. According to experts from the University of California, Pelagornithidae evolved enormous bodies to better help them dominate the southern oceans of the planet. Their dominance lasted millions of years, and their bones are undoubtedly trapped underneath hundreds of feet of ice. As Antarctica continues to melt, paleontologists are hopefully going to find even more specimens and maybe even larger examples of prehistoric birds. The unexplored island. The Antarctic Peninsula is one of the quickest warming places on the planet. It is home to two of the biggest glaciers currently in existence. There's the Thwaites Glacier and the Pine Island Glacier, and both of them are quickly melting. As they melt, mysterious things are revealed underneath the fading ice. And recently, one of these discoveries was an unexplored island. The island was discovered in 2020 on February 24th by scientists surveying the glaciers around Pine Island Bay. It's tiny, only about 350 meters long, and is still mostly covered in ice. However, that ice is melting to reveal a layer of dry brown rocks. The island is made almost entirely of volcanic granite and was likely once part of an extensive reef system. Scientists have named it Sif Island after the Norse goddess, and they say it could be invaluable to their research. By investigating the mysterious island, scientists should be able to get a better idea of the lost world of Antarctica. They'll be able to see how the coastal reef used to function, and maybe even identify some wildlife that had once called the island home. The field of mummies. Chinese scientists in 2016 discovered a graveyard in Antarctica. Not a human graveyard though, but one filled with hundreds of mummified penguins. These animals weren't buried. They were left to desiccate and mummify on the frozen ground. The whole area has been described as a killing field, with up to 15 mummified penguin bodies per square yard. According to the latest figures from 2020, there are about 5.77 million breeding pairs of penguins in Antarctica. 5 out of the 18 penguin species call the continent home, with 4 more species living on subantarctic islands. Why in the world were there so many mummified dead penguins on one desolate stretch of land? It's a total mystery, and still is. It looked as if there had been a mass casualty event, some kind of intentional penguin slaughter. And here's where things get even stranger. This wasn't the only time that massive amounts of mummified penguins have been found in Antarctica. It happened again 4 years later in September of 2020. Researchers from the University of North Carolina found a mummified penguin colony that was exposed due to the melting ice. Something happened to an ancient nesting site of Adelaide penguins to wipe them out almost instantly. We still don't know what killed the penguins, the ancient ones or the more recent ones. Scientists say that this particular part of Antarctica has been home to penguins for thousands of years, and mass casualty events appear to keep on happening. But it's a complete mystery as to what's actually killing them. The Cave Oasis. NASA's Operation Icebridge made an extremely bizarre discovery back in 2019. Underneath the Thwaites Glacier in West Antarctica, they came across a giant underground cavern. This cavern is about the size of Manhattan, and it's like a warm cave oasis underneath the ice. Scientists with NASA were taking radar images of the glacier when they identified the cavern. It's located between the ice of the glacier and the bedrock underneath it, a kind of pocket filled with incredibly warm air. While the cavern would undoubtedly be beautiful to enter, a hollow space filled with beautiful blue crystal ice, like out of some kind of frozen fairy tale, it's really quite horrifying. The warm air in the cave, which is so unbelievably enormous, is helping the ice around it to melt much faster than scientists originally anticipated. This means the cavern will continue to get larger and larger. More of the ice will melt, and soon enough, the whole glacier will be gone. What happens if this glacier melts? Unfortunately, a lot of people will lose their lives. Scientists say that if the glacier melts and more warm caverns are discovered, the sea level will rise by about 2 feet. And once the Thwaites Glacier is gone, the rest will quickly vanish, and the sea level will most likely rise another 8 feet. Space rocks. In 1912, scientists collected the Adelaide land meteorite from Antarctica. It would be the first of 45,000 space rocks collected from the southernmost continent on our planet. Each space rock has a unique composition that gives scientists more evidence about the makeup of our solar system, as well as the earliest conditions out in the universe. But why in the world is Antarctica home to so much space debris? Scientists say it's all because of the Antarctic advantage. There is a massive contrast between rock and ice. Because most meteorites are black in color, they stand out like sore thumbs in the white landscape. It's also a very dry environment that helps preserve meteorites as if they are sitting in a freezer. This is even true for meteorites that fell to Antarctica over 1 million years ago. The whole continent is like an open-air refrigerator, preserving artifacts from space. Scientists can practically walk across the snow with a butterfly net and scoop them up. The biggest issue is that getting to Antarctica and searching through meteorite zones is difficult. The rocks are spread across the icy landscape of over 5.4 million square miles. Scientists estimate there could be as many as 300,000 meteorites waiting to be picked from the ice. It's just a matter of finding them. Mountain or pyramid? There is a mountain in Antarctica that looks an awful lot like a pyramid. It's huge and covered in snow, with perfectly pyramid-shaped contours, smooth and seemingly even sides, and a pointy peak, just like the Great Pyramid of Khufu in Egypt. It really does look as though one of the Giza pyramids was transported to Antarctica and then covered in a thick layer of snow and ice. But is this truly a pyramid, or is it just a mountain that looks like one? The answer, unsurprisingly, depends on who you ask. Eric Rignot from the University of California, Irvine, a man who is also a senior research scientist at NASA, says no. He told Live Science in 2016 that it's just an ordinary mountain, an unnamed peak in the Ellsworth Mountains with pyramid-like traits. He said it's not that strange for a mountain to take on such a shape. Even though scientists like Eric have vocally denounced the pyramid as an optical illusion, there are still plenty of people out there who believe it to be real. There are even some conspiracies floating around that say the pyramid is part of a long-lost Antarctic civilization, one that for some unknown reason, mainstream scientists are covering up. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below.
The Antarctic fossil rainforest. The frigid continent of Antarctica was once just as hot as Italy is today. We know this because of a fossil rainforest discovered in Antarctica. These days, the average temperature at the South Pole is 78 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. 90 million years before today, the temperature could soar to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a difference of almost 200 degrees. According to marine geologist Johann P. Klages, one of the scientists responsible for unearthing the fossils in Antarctica, 90 million years ago was the last time the continent was completely covered with vegetation. He also says Antarctica was probably home to a rich biodiversity of animal life, including dinosaurs. The fossils Johann and his team discovered weren't actually found on the continent, but at the bottom of the sea floor back in 2017. They found fossilized tree roots that date to the Cretaceous period. And not that long ago, a research team from Brazil uncovered pieces of charcoal dating back 75 million years. The charcoal almost definitely came from an ancient fire that engulfed the rainforest in Antarctica. What this means is that something major happened that caused Antarctica to basically burst into flame. And according to these scientists, the climate can and almost certainly will shift again sometime in the future, so that Antarctica is once more as hot and as tropical as the Amazon rainforest. UFO over the South Pole. In 2012, aliens were spotted hovering over Antarctica. A mysterious, unidentified flying object was captured on video floating over the Neumayer Station 3. The object is blurry in the footage, so it could technically be anything. UFO buffs swear it was an alien ship. Fast forward a decade, we still don't have any answers for what this mysterious thing was hovering over Antarctica. What we know is that the object appeared directly above the research station. It looked perfectly round, and it seemed to be about the size of a balloon. Not a birthday balloon, but a large weather balloon. Now, everyone has heard the weather balloon excuse before, and so this doesn't sit right with some people. After all, what in the world was a weather balloon doing so far south, lingering over a research station where tests and experiments are carried out for things like meteorology and atmospheric chemistry? It doesn't make any sense. Plus, the object appeared in frame only for a handful of seconds. Whatever this thing was, it appears to have come down from the sky, paused momentarily above the research station, and then took off again. This isn't the kind of behavior we'd expect to see with a weather balloon. We don't really know if this was proof of aliens in Antarctica, but it's definitely mysterious. All these years later, most people have forgotten all about it, and so the investigation is pretty much closed. Antarctic jellies. An Australian research crew spent 2018 and 2019 studying the waters of Antarctica.
Researcher Emiliano Cimoli from the University of Tasmania put together a short video to show what the scientists discovered. The film is about 7 minutes long, and it shows some of the strange yet beautiful creatures the scientists found flourishing in the icy water just below Antarctica's ice. One part of this study involved examining algae which lives underneath the ice, clinging to it like a mold. They say this mold-like growth is an intricate part of the food chain and helps to feed lots of the other creatures living here. By far, one of the coolest animals they focused on is a jellyfish called a sea angel. Scientists have described it as a tiny wing-flapping jelly that looks like a feather brought to life. There are various jellies underneath Antarctica's ice, but these ones are particularly fascinating. They have small orange crustaceans living on their bodies that act as parasites, easily viewable since the jellies have translucent bodies. You can even see the last meal sitting in the jelly's belly thanks to its nearly invisible skin. While most people may think Antarctica is a wasteland populated by nothing but penguins, it's actually teeming with life, especially the waters. These fantastic jellyfish are only one part of the ecosystem, which consists of hundreds of other strange and mesmerizing creatures. Mysterious cave. Thanks to Google Maps, a mysterious and unexplained cave was discovered on a remote island in Antarctica. Some wild claims have come up surrounding this bizarre cave, with some people saying it could be the entrance to Hollow Earth. Some call it a military cover-up, and some even say it might have something to do with aliens. What we know about the cave is that it first appeared on Google Maps in 2007, and then was gone 6 months later. At least this is according to the Google enthusiasts who have been busy tracking the phenomenon. The cave can be found on Greenwich Island, located in the south of Antarctica. While no trace of it appears to be left today, it was still definitely there in 2007. The big question is why the massive opening into the earth suddenly vanished after people found it and started talking about it online. And of course, the question as to what was hiding at the bottom of that cave. One of the prevailing theories is that the cave is a secret entrance to Hollow Earth. Hollow Earth is a fringe conspiracy theory which says underneath the surface of the planet is a secondary landscape, a massive land with its own atmosphere, with towering mountains and strange monsters. This place is only accessible through massive caves leading down hundreds of miles into the ground. Nobody has ever been able to prove it, and pretty much every major scientist says it's nothing but science fiction. In truth, the cave probably vanished from Google Maps because it collapsed or was frozen over with ice. In the end, unless you see it with your own eyes, you just can't know for sure. I wanted to say a big thank you to Floyd Reeby and Mike Mueller for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Subglacial Lake. Lake Snow Eagle is a newly discovered subglacial lake hiding underneath Antarctica. By subglacial, I mean the lake is buried underneath glacial ice. From one side to the other, the lake is about 26 miles long, making it one of the biggest of its kind on the continent. It's hiding inside a canyon in East Antarctica, covered and invisible from above by an insanely thick ice sheet. The only way to discover this kind of thing is by using advanced research equipment. Scientists had to use a polar research aircraft equipped with the latest tools to identify the lake under the ice. What's interesting is that it's only a couple hundred miles from the coast, and this has given the scientists an idea. They think that because it's so close to the sea, the mysterious lake could contain information as to how the ice sheet formed in the first place. The lake is about 34 million years old. Because of that, it almost certainly contains geological evidence of Antarctica's past. Dr. Don Blankenship from the Institute for Geophysics at the University of Texas says that as of now, researchers know that something changed with the ice sheet 10,000 years ago. They don't know what or why. As they dig deeper into the subglacial lake, they are hoping to uncover secrets of Antarctica's past. Sediment at the bottom of the lake should yield clues as to every little thing that's happened on the continent for the last tens of millions of years. Fresh plastic. In a shocking and hardly believable first, scientists have discovered microplastics in fresh Antarctic snow. Fresh means snow that has recently fallen from the sky. In other words, scientists have found snow infused with plastic particles beginning to blanket Antarctica. It shows just how extensive global plastic pollution is, seeing as it's already in the water cycle and coming down in Antarctica in snowflakes. The research was done by scientists at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand. They looked at snow samples from 19 different places across the Ross ice shelf. When they looked at these samples, they found plastic particles, specifically the kind of plastic that can be found everywhere on Earth in clothes and water bottles. But here's what's even more disturbing. The study found that 29 particles per liter of melted snow are made of plastic. That's even higher than concentrations in the water around Antarctica. That means there's a higher concentration of plastic up in the clouds than in the ocean. The find was pretty depressing to the scientists, who traveled to Antarctica in 2019, optimistic there would be no microplastics in such a remote place. Sadly, they were completely wrong. The wreckage of the Endurance. 2 miles beneath the water in the Weddell Sea, not far from the mainland of Antarctica, Ernest Shackleton's legendary vessel, the Endurance, has been found. It's sitting on the Antarctic sea floor, almost 10,000 feet below, since it was last seen in 1915. That was when Shackleton, an Irish-British explorer, watched with his crew of 27 men as their ship sank into the chaotic depths of the ocean. Their mission had been to reach the South Pole by traveling through uncharted territory in eastern Antarctica. Shackleton proved too reckless, too obsessed with getting to the South Pole, and so he ignored the warnings of local whalers. They told him not to go in 1914 because of poor ice conditions. Shackleton thought he knew better than the experienced whalers, and his ship ended up sinking. Still, Shackleton proved to be a most resilient leader. He led his stranded men to Elephant Island, where they set up camp in the snow. He then took 5 of his men and embarked on a journey across 800 miles of freezing water to reach South Georgia Island. And once there, he recruited help to go back and pick up the rest of the crew. All these years later, the Endurance has finally been uncovered, documented, and photographed. A team of researchers traveled on the South African icebreaker SA Agulhas 2, searched for 2 weeks, then used submersible crafts to scan the sea floor. Finally, they came across the legendary vessel, and because of the cold Antarctic temperatures, the Endurance looks exactly the same as it did when it sank over a century ago. Unknown life. A series of mysterious caves have been discovered in Antarctica. Scientists say the caves are warm enough that they could support plant and animal species, but nobody knows just yet. The issue is that Australian scientists from Australian National University found the caves hidden underneath the icy surface of Antarctica, but they haven't been able to look inside them. The caves have been created by steam leaking out from Mount Erebus, potentially one of the most dangerous volcanoes in Antarctica. This steam has made a kind of labyrinth of tunnels and caverns underneath the ice, and has also helped to keep it warm inside. Believe it or not, these Antarctic caves can reach temperatures of 77 degrees Fahrenheit. There is also quite a bit of light filtering through the ice, which could help plants to grow. In all likelihood, the life forms living in these caves are things like moss and algae, but there could be small invertebrates as well. Maybe some really small bugs or tiny living organisms. Researchers won't know until they can physically search the caves and look for potential life forms. Ship in the ice. In 1985, the Soviet Union dispatched a giant icebreaker to Antarctica. They did this because one of their research vessels had gotten trapped in the thick ice with 53 people on board. The vessel got stuck in 12 feet of thick, nearly indestructible ice. Those 53 men were stuck in the polar nights with bitter frost in their lungs and literally nowhere to go. Even though the Russian icebreaker, the Vladivostok, went to save them in early June, it wouldn't reach them until July, and so they were stranded there for nearly 2 months. The ship that was stuck was the Mikhail Somov, built in 1975 as a Russian research vessel. After spending all summer in the ice, the Vladivostok finally reached it, broke enough ice for the ship to get out, and everyone was saved. This was over 50 years ago, and there hasn't been quite this dramatic of an Antarctic rescue since then. Thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about Antarctica. See you next time! Bye!